At my sister's engagement party, she placed me at the farthest table in the hallway so her important guests wouldn't see me. She told everyone I was a poor loser who would embarrass her. I smiled, ate alone, and left quietly. 6 months later, after Forbes revealed my net worth, she showed up at my penthouse asking me to pay for her luxury wedding. That's when I reminded her of one thing she forgot: the distant table. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope, my name calligraphed in gold ink with the kind of flourish that costs extra. I recognized my sister's handwriting. She had always been the artistic one, the one whose talents were celebrated and displayed, while my more practical skills were merely useful. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the card, already knowing what it would say. Mr. and Mrs. Harold Richardson request the pleasure of your company at the engagement celebration of their daughter, Chloe Elizabeth Richardson, to Mr. Andrew Whitmore III. Chloe, my sister, 3 years younger than me, perpetually favored, endlessly indulged. She had graduated from college with honors, landed a prestigious job in marketing, and was now engaged to a man whose family name carried enough weight to open any door in the city. Our parents had been planning this moment since she was born, investing their resources and attention in her future while I was left to make my own way. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and studied it. The date, the time, the location, an exclusive venue in the city, the kind of place where cocktails cost more than most people's dinners. I was invited, clearly, but the wording told me everything I needed to know about my place in this celebration. Not our daughter, but their daughter. Not sister of the bride, but simply Ms. Maya Chun, an afterthought in the family narrative. I should have declined. I should have sent a polite regret and a modest gift and continued my quiet existence on the periphery of their lives. But something made me want to go, curiosity, perhaps, or the lingering hope that this time might be different. That this time, they might see me. They didn't. The venue was everything I expected: crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, waiters circulating with trays of champagne and miniature hors d'oeuvres. I arrived alone, dressed in a simple black dress that cost more than it looked, but still couldn't compete with the designer gowns swirling around me. I checked in at the reception table, gave my name, and waited to be directed to my seat. The young woman at the table consulted her seating chart, then looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. Miss Chun, you're at table 17. I waited for her to point me in the right direction. Instead, she gestured vaguely toward the back of the venue, where a doorway led to what appeared to be a hallway. Table 17 is through there. Yes, just follow the corridor. You'll see it. I followed the corridor. I walked past the main dining room, past the restrooms, past a service entrance where kitchen staff were loading trays onto carts. And there, at the very end of the hallway, tucked into an alcove that was clearly not intended for guests, was a small round table set for 4. I was the only one there. I stood for a long moment, taking in the scene. The table was draped in the same white linen as the main room, but the centerpiece was smaller, the chairs less comfortable, the lighting harsh and unflattering. Through the doorway, I could hear the murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, the warm hum of a celebration I had been deliberately excluded from. My sister had put me at a distant table. Not just distant, hidden, literally out of sight, in a hallway where no one would see me, where I couldn't possibly embarrass her with my presence. I sat down. I smoothed my napkin across my lap. I waited. Eventually, 3 other people joined me. An elderly aunt I barely recognized, her husband who slept through most of the meal, and a distant cousin who spent the entire time on her phone. We ate our dinner in awkward silence, served by staff who clearly resented having to navigate the corridor with our plates. Through the doorway, I could hear laughter and toasts and the sound of my sister's voice, bright and confident, holding court among her guests. I didn't see my parents that night. I didn't see my sister. I finished my meal, left my gift on the table, and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. On my way home, I stopped at a convenience store and bought a pint of ice cream. I sat in my car in the parking lot, eating it straight from the container, and I made a decision. I was done. Not with anger. I had spent too many years being angry, and it had changed nothing. Not with grief. I had mourned the family I would never have for so long that mourning had become a second language. But with expectation. With hope. With the endless, exhausting effort of trying to earn love that was never available for purchase. I was done. The next morning, I woke up and went to work. I was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company, competent but unremarkable, the kind of employee who showed up on time and did good work and never caused any drama. No one there knew about my family, my sister, the distant table in the hallway. No one knew that I had spent the previous night eating ice cream in a parking lot, mourning a family that had never really existed. And no one knew about my side project. For 3 years, I had been developing an app in my spare time. A productivity tool, deceptively simple, that solved a problem I had encountered in my own work. I had coded it on weekends, refined it in the evenings, tested it with a small group of beta users who had found it through word of mouth. It had never been about money. It was about creation, about building something that worked, about proving to myself that I was capable of more than my family believed. But money, it turned out, was inevitable. 6 months after my sister's engagement party, the app went viral. A tech influencer discovered it, raved about it on social media, and suddenly everyone wanted it. Downloads exploded. Investors came calling. Acquisition offers flooded my inbox. I hired a lawyer, then a team, then an entire company. Within a year, I had sold the app for a sum that made my head spin and launched a foundation to support other women in tech. My family knew nothing about any of this. They didn't read tech blogs, didn't follow industry news, didn't track the accomplishments of a daughter they had long since written off. To them, I was still the quiet, unremarkable sister, the one who had been put at the distant table because she didn't matter. And then Forbes published an article. From quiet coder to tech millionaire, the Maya Chen story. It was a profile piece, well-researched and flattering, detailing my journey from overlooked sibling to successful entrepreneur. It mentioned my background, my education, my years of quiet work. It mentioned my family only in passing. Chen grew up in a suburban household with her parents and younger sister. But the implication was clear. I had done this alone, without their help, without their support, without their belief. The article went viral. Not as viral as my app, but viral enough. It was shared on social media, discussed in comment sections, linked from news aggregators. And eventually, inevitably, it reached my family. My mother called first. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with her ringtone. I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. She called again, and again, 7 times in 2 hours, each call more urgent than the last. I didn't answer any of them. My father called next. His messages were shorter, more restrained, but the subtext was the same. Confusion, disbelief, the desperate need to understand how the daughter they had dismissed had become someone worth noticing. I didn't call back. And then, 3 days after the article appeared, my sister showed up at my door. I lived in a penthouse apartment now, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I could, and because the view made me happy every time I looked at it. My sister had never been there. She had never asked, and I had never invited her. So when my building's intercom buzzed and the doorman announced, "A Ms. Chloe Richardson to see you," I was genuinely surprised. I considered refusing. I considered telling the doorman to send her away, that I wasn't accepting visitors, that she should have called first. But curiosity won, as it always does. I wanted to see her face. I wanted to hear what she had to say. I buzzed her up. She stood in my doorway, taking in the penthouse with eyes that couldn't quite hide their calculation. The marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the custom furniture I had spent months selecting. All of it was evidence, and she was processing it with the speed of someone whose assumptions had just been violently overturned. Maya, her voice was bright, too bright, the voice she used with people she wanted something from. "This place is incredible." I had no idea. "Come in." I stepped aside, letting her enter. "Can I get you something? Water? Coffee? Wine if you have it." She was already walking toward the windows, drawn by the view. "Oh my God, you can see the whole city from here." I poured 2 glasses of wine and joined her by the windows. We stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the skyline, and I waited for her to state her purpose. "So," she finally said, turning to face me. "Forbes. $1 million app sale. A penthouse with a view." She laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been busy." "I have. Why didn't you tell us?" The question was almost accusatory, as if my silence had been a betrayal rather than a natural consequence of their neglect. "We're your family. We should have known." "You didn't ask." She blinked, momentarily thrown. "What? You didn't ask?" "Not once, in all these years, did you ask about my life, my work, my plans. You assumed I was the same person you had always dismissed, and you never bothered to check whether that assumption was accurate. Her smile tightened. That's not fair. We've always cared about you. You put me at a distant table at your engagement party, literally in a hallway, out of sight, because you told everyone I was a poor loser who would embarrass you. I kept my voice calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. That's not caring. That's contempt. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was different. The seating was complicated, and I had to make compromises. You made a choice. You chose to hide me. And I accepted that choice, because I had spent my entire life accepting your choices. I went to your party, I sat at your distant table, I ate my dinner alone, and I left without a word. That's what I did. I paused, letting the silence stretch. And now you're here, in my home, looking at my view, drinking my wine, because you read an article and discovered that the sister you hid in a hallway is worth something after all. Her face flushed. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? She hesitated, and I watched her recalculate, adjust her approach. This was not going according to her script. I was not playing the role she had assigned me, the grateful sibling, eager to please, desperate for approval. I was something else entirely, and she didn't know how to respond. I'm getting married, she finally said. The wedding is in 8 months. Andrew's family is contributing, but it's not enough for what we want. We need. She stopped, swallowed, forced herself to continue. I need your help. My help. Financial help. Just a loan, really. We'll pay you back. But the venue, the caterer, the dress, it's all so expensive, and we want it to be perfect. I took a sip of my wine, watching her over the rim of the glass. How much? Her eyes lit up, hope flickering despite her efforts to appear nonchalant. Well, we've been looking at venues, and the one we really want is $200,000 for the weekend. Plus catering, which is another 80. The photographer is 20, the florist is 15, the band is 30. She was listing items now, warming to her subject, as if my agreement was already secured. And of course there's my dress, which is 12, and the bridesmaids' dresses, and the invitations, and the welcome dinner, and the brunch the next morning. Stop. I held up my hand, and she fell silent. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to pay for your wedding? A wedding that will cost, by your own estimate, close to $400,000. A wedding for which you have not yet secured funding from your fiancé's family, your own parents, or any other source. You want me to write a check for an amount that would change most people's lives, so that you can have a perfect day that you have been planning since you were a little girl. She nodded, her expression hopeful. It's not just for me. It's for the whole family. You'll be there, of course. I'll make sure you have a good seat this time, not like at the engagement party. And Mom and Dad will be so happy, and Andrew's family will be impressed, and everyone will see what a wonderful, generous sister I have. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of her request, delivered with such earnest entitlement, was genuinely funny. You think I'm going to pay for your wedding? I said. After everything. After the distant table. After the years of dismissal. After the complete and total disregard for my existence unless it could benefit you in some way. You think I'm going to write you a check for $400,000? Her face hardened. It's not for me. It's for the family. We're your family, Maya. We're all you have. I set down my wine glass and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had conquered without their help. You're not all I have. I have friends who love me, colleagues who respect me, a career that fulfills me. I have a life that I built entirely on my own, without a single contribution from you or Mom or Dad or anyone else in our family. You're not all I have. You're barely anything I have. Maya, I turned to face her. Let me remind you of something. Something you seem to have forgotten. I walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. At your engagement party, you put me at a distant table, literally in a hallway, hidden from view, because you were ashamed of me. You told your friends I was a poor loser, someone who would embarrass you. You made a choice that night, a choice to exclude me, to diminish me, to pretend I didn't exist. She opened her mouth to respond, but I continued, my voice hardening. I accepted that choice. I sat at that table, ate my dinner, and left without a word. I didn't cause a scene, didn't demand an explanation, didn't make you defend your decision. I simply accepted it. Because that's what I had always done. I accepted being invisible, being overlooked, being dismissed. I accepted that my place in this family was at the distant table, out of sight, where I couldn't bother anyone. I paused, letting the silence fill the space between us. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the sister you can hide in a hallway and then summon when you need money. I'm not the poor loser who should be grateful for any scrap of attention you deign to throw her way. I'm a successful entrepreneur with a net worth that would make your head spin, and I have absolutely no intention of spending a single dollar of my money on your wedding. Her face went white. You're not going to help me? I'm going to remind you of something. The distant table. Remember it? The one you put me at because you were ashamed of me. I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That's where you are in my life now. At the distant table. Far away, out of sight, where I don't have to think about you or your wedding or your endless, insatiable demands. That's your place now. And you're not getting a better seat. She stared at me, her mouth open, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. You can't do this. You can't just. We're family. We're not family. We're people who share DNA, and that's all. Family is built on love and respect and mutual support, none of which has ever existed between us. I walked to the door and held it open. I think you should leave now. She didn't move. Maya, please. I'm begging you. The wedding is everything to me. If it doesn't happen, if it's not perfect, I don't know what I'll do. That's not my problem. I'll pay you back. I swear. Every penny. You couldn't pay me back if you worked for the rest of your life. And even if you could, I wouldn't accept it. The money is not the point. I gestured toward the open door. Goodbye, Chloe. She stood frozen for a long moment, her eyes searching my face for some sign of weakness, some crack in my resolve. She found none. Slowly, she walked toward the door, pausing in the threshold. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. No, I'm going to regret nothing. I closed the door behind her and locked it. I stood in my entryway for a long moment, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. Then I walked back to the window, picked up my wine glass, and watched the sun set over the city I had conquered without their help. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, no regret. Just a vast, empty calm. The peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for people who will never see you. The fallout was, as expected, dramatic. My mother called 17 times over the next 3 days. I didn't answer. My father left voicemails that cycled through confusion, anger, and desperate pleading. Extended family members reached out, some to mediate, others to demand explanations. I ignored them all. Chloe's fiancé, Andrew, sent me an email, polite, measured, asking if there was anything we can do to resolve this situation. I didn't respond. And then, a week after Chloe's visit, my mother showed up at my building. I was expecting her. The doorman buzzed up, his voice apologetic, and I told him to send her in. Better to have this conversation on my terms, in my space, surrounded by the evidence of everything I had achieved without her. She stood in my doorway, taking in the penthouse with the same calculating eyes her daughter had used. But beneath the calculation was something else, genuine shock, perhaps, or the dawning realization that she had fundamentally misunderstood her eldest child for 30 years. Maya. Her voice was soft, uncertain. This is incredible. Come in, Mom. I led her to the living room, gestured toward the sofa. Can I get you something? No, thank you. She sat carefully, perching on the edge of the cushion as if afraid it might reject her. I came to talk about Chloe. I assumed. Maya, she's devastated. The wedding might not happen. Andrew's family is reconsidering their contribution because of all the drama. Your sister is falling apart, and you're the only one who can help. I sat across from her, maintaining the distance between us. I'm not going to help. I told her that clearly. But why? Her voice cracked. She's your sister. We're your family. How can you just turn your back on us? I considered the question. It deserved an honest answer, even if that honesty would wound her further. I'm not turning my back on you. I'm simply refusing to continue a relationship that has always been one-sided. For 30 years, I have given and given and given. My time, my attention, my accommodation, my willingness to make myself small so that Chloe could shine. And in return, I have received nothing. No acknowledgement, no appreciation, no love. Just dismissal, disregard, and a distant table at her engagement party. My mother flinched. The table, that was a mistake. Chloe didn't mean. Chloe meant exactly what she did. She put me at that table because she was ashamed of me, because I didn't fit the image she wanted to project, because I was the sister she could hide away and forget about until she needed something. I leaned forward, my voice hardening. And now she needs something. Now I'm useful. Now I'm worth noticing. And I'm supposed to be grateful for that? I'm supposed to write a check and pretend that the past 30 years didn't happen? She's your sister. She's a stranger who shares my DNA. That's all. I stood up, walking to the window. I don't know her anything. I don't know you anything. I have built a life, a career, a future entirely on my own, without your help, your support, or your belief. And I have done it while carrying the weight of your neglect, your dismissal, your complete and total failure to see me as anything other than the background to Chloe's foreground. My mother was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I turned to face her. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt anymore. I'm just finished. Finished with trying to earn love that was never available. Finished with accommodating choices that always excluded me. Finished with being the daughter who doesn't matter. What can I do? How can I make this right? Nothing. The word was quiet, but absolute. There's nothing you can do. The past is past, and it can't be undone. The relationship we could have had, should have had, is 30 years too late to build. She sobbed, her face in her hands. I watched her without moving, without comforting, without the instinctive response that had governed my interactions with her for 3 decades. I was not her daughter anymore, not in any meaningful sense. I was a stranger, observing her grief from a great distance. I'll leave, she finally whispered. I'll leave and I won't bother you again. She stood, walking toward the door, then paused. Your grandmother would be proud of you. She always believed you would become something extraordinary. She left, and I stood alone in my penthouse, the city glittering beyond the windows, the silence heavy with the weight of everything that had been said and everything that remained unspoken. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I simply breathed, and the air was clean and cold and tasted like freedom. The months passed. I didn't attend my sister's wedding. I heard through mutual acquaintances that it happened, scaled back and less lavish than originally planned, funded by Andrew's family and our parents' retirement savings. I sent no gift, no card, no acknowledgement. My absence was noted, discussed, dissected, but no one reached out to understand it. They preferred their narrative, the ungrateful sister, the selfish millionaire, to the messy truth of their own complicity. I let them have their narrative. I had my own, and it was sufficient. My career continued to flourish. I sold another company, launched a venture capital fund focused on women-led startups, became a regular speaker at conferences and events. I was interviewed by magazines, profiled on podcasts, invited to panels and roundtables. My face appeared on screens and in publications, always accompanied by the same narrative, self-made, determined, successful. No one asked about my family. No one cared about the distant table or the years of neglect. They wanted the story of triumph, not the story of survival. And I gave it to them, because the story of survival was mine alone. But I thought about my sister sometimes. I thought about her standing in my doorway, listing venues and caterers and designer dresses, utterly convinced that I would write a check, because that's what family did. I thought about the shock on her face when I reminded her of the distant table, the moment her assumptions collapsed and she realized, finally, that I was not the person she had always believed me to be. I wondered if she understood, now, what she had lost. Not the money, that was never the point, but the sister who might have been, the relationship that could have existed if things had been different. I wondered if she mourned that loss, or if she was too consumed by her own narrative to recognize it. Probably the latter. Some people never learn to see beyond their own reflection. A year after the wedding, I received a letter from my sister. It was handwritten, on plain stationery, no return address. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the same careful script that had addressed my engagement party invitation, now stripped of its gold ink and calligraphic flourishes. Maya, I'm writing this because I don't know how else to reach you. You've blocked me on everything, and Mom says you won't take her calls. I'm not asking you to respond. I'm not asking for anything. I just need to say some things that should have been said a long time ago. I was wrong. About everything. About the table. About the way I treated you. About the years of taking you for granted and assuming you would always be there when I needed you. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I didn't understand who you were. I didn't see you. I saw the sister I had constructed in my mind, the quiet one, the background one, the one who didn't matter. I never bothered to look beyond that construction, never asked if it was accurate, never gave you the chance to be anything else. That's on me. All of it. The wedding happened. It was smaller than I wanted, less perfect than I dreamed. But it happened, and I'm married, and I'm trying to build a life that doesn't revolve around getting what I want. It's harder than I expected. It turns out that being an adult means accepting that you don't always get what you want, and I'm not very good at that yet. But I'm learning. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I am the way I am, why I treated you the way I did, why I couldn't see what was right in front of me. It's painful and humbling and probably the most important work I've ever done. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. I see what you've accomplished, who you've become, how much you've achieved without any help from the people who should have been supporting you. And I'm in awe. You're remarkable, Maya. You always were. I was just too blind to see it. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not the superficial conversations we've always had, I'm here. No expectations. No demands. Just a sister who finally understands what she lost. Chloe. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer of my desk, next to the invitation she had sent to her engagement party, the one with my name in gold ink, the one that had led me to a distant table in a hallway. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. But I kept the letter, and sometimes, in quiet moments, I took it out and read it again, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for as long as I could remember. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement, finally, after all these years. Acknowledgement that I had been wronged, that I had been seen, that I had mattered. It was enough. 2 years later, I agreed to meet my sister for coffee. It was her suggestion, tentatively offered in a follow-up letter, and I surprised myself by accepting. I chose the location, a small cafe in my neighborhood, neutral ground, easy escape if I needed it. I arrived early, ordered a latte, and waited. She walked in at exactly the appointed time, and I almost didn't recognize her. She was thinner, her face less carefully made up, her clothes simpler and less expensive. She looked older, but also younger. The tension that had always defined her features had softened, replaced by something that might have been peace. Maya. She stood by my table, uncertain, waiting for permission to sit. Chloe. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down. She sat, ordering a tea when the server came, and we sat in awkward silence until it arrived. When we were alone again, she spoke first. Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to. I know. I've been in therapy for 2 years. I've done a lot of work. I've tried to understand why I was the way I was, why I treated you the way I did. She paused, gathering herself. The short answer is that I was terrified. Terrified that if anyone saw you clearly, they would realize that you were the remarkable one and I was just ordinary. So I made you invisible. I hid you. I convinced myself that you didn't matter because if you did matter, then I didn't. I listened without interrupting, letting her words land where they would. It was wrong. It was cruel. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I see what I did, and I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do it again. I set down my coffee cup. Why now? What changed? You. Her eyes met mine, steady and sincere. You walked away. You didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't try to make me understand. You just left. And in your absence, I finally had to confront what I had lost. Not the money. That was never the point, though it took me a long time to realize that. But the sister I never bothered to know. The relationship I never bothered to build. The person I could have been if I hadn't spent my whole life competing with someone who wasn't competing with me. I considered her words, weighing their sincerity. She had changed, that much was evident. The question was whether the change was deep enough, lasting enough, to bridge the gap between us. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. I'm not sure I ever will be. What you did, what you all did, that's not something that can be erased by good behavior and sincere apologies. She nodded, accepting my terms. I know, but I'm willing to try. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm willing to see you, to know you, to be part of your life in whatever small way feels right. I'm willing to build something new, something that acknowledges the past without being controlled by it. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. It's going to require patience and honesty and the willingness to fail and try again. But if you're willing to do the work, so am I. I'm willing. I've never been more willing. We sat in the cafe for another hour, talking about nothing and everything. Her therapy, my work, the mundane details of lives that had been separate for too long. It was awkward, stilted, the conversation of strangers learning to communicate in a new language. But it was a start. When we finally parted, Chloe hugged me. A genuine embrace. Warm and uncertain and full of possibility. I'll see you soon, she asked. Soon, I agreed. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. She nodded, accepting my terms, and walked away into the afternoon light. I watched her go. This sister who had caused me so much pain and was now trying, desperately, to make amends. I didn't know if we would succeed. I didn't know if the relationship we built would ever be truly loving, truly reciprocal, truly healing. But I knew that we were trying, and that was more than I had ever dared to hope. I returned to my apartment as the sun was setting, the city glittering beyond my windows. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline I had conquered without their help, the life I had built from nothing, the future that stretched before me with infinite possibility. And I thought about the distant table, the hallway where I had sat alone, eating my dinner while my sister celebrated with her guests. The moment I had finally understood that I would never earn their love, never win their approval, never be seen by people who had decided long ago that I wasn't worth seeing. That moment had broken something in me, but it had also freed me. It had released me from the endless, exhausting effort of trying to be enough for people who would never be satisfied. It had given me permission to build my own life, on my own terms, without their permission or approval. And now, years later, my sister was trying to find her way back to me. Not because I had money, not because I was successful, but because she had finally, belatedly, begun to see me. It was too little, too late, too compromised by years of neglect. But it was something. I didn't know if we would ever be truly close. I didn't know if the wounds would ever fully heal. But I knew that I was willing to try, and that, I had learned, was the most important thing. I picked up my phone and dialed Chloe's number. She answered on the second ring. Maya, next Saturday, lunch at my place. I'll cook. I paused. Bring your appetite. I heard her laugh, a genuine sound, warm and surprised. I'll be there. I ended the call and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere out there, my sister was celebrating her small victory, her tentative step toward redemption. And I was here, in my penthouse, surrounded by the evidence of everything I had achieved without her. The distant table was a memory now. A scar, not a wound. A reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. I was no longer at the distant table. I was at the head of my own table, in my own home, on my own terms. And if I chose to invite my sister to join me, that was my choice, my gift, my grace. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was simply the beginning of something new, something fragile and uncertain and full of possibility. And it was enough. The next Saturday, Chloe arrived at my apartment with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers, simple, unpretentious, chosen with care. I let her in, took her offerings, and led her to the kitchen where I was preparing lunch. This is nice, she said, looking around at my space. Really nice. It's home. I handed her a glass of wine. Make yourself comfortable. Lunch will be ready in 20 minutes. She wandered into the living room while I finished cooking, and I heard her pause by the windows, taking in the view. When I joined her with plates of pasta and salad, she was standing exactly where I had stood so many times, looking out at the city. I can see why you love this, she said. It's peaceful up here, separate from everything. That's exactly it. I set the plates on the coffee table and sat on the sofa. Come eat. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the food warm and satisfying, the wine smooth and dry. Then Chloe spoke, her voice tentative. I've been thinking about the distant table, about what you said that day when you reminded me of it. She set down her fork. I've tried to imagine what it must have felt like for you, sitting there alone, knowing that I had put you there on purpose, knowing that I was ashamed of you. I didn't respond, letting her work through it. I can't fully imagine it. I've never been in that position, the one who's hidden away, the one who doesn't matter. But I've tried, and every time I try, I end up crying. Her voice cracked. I did that to you. I made you feel that way. And I can never undo it. No, you can't. I kept my voice gentle but honest. But you can acknowledge it. You can learn from it. You can become someone who wouldn't do it again. I want to be that person. She looked at me, her eyes wet. I want to be someone you're not ashamed of. Someone you want in your life. I reached out and took her hand. You're on your way. It's going to take time, a lot of time. And there will be setbacks, moments when you fall back into old patterns, times when I have to remind you of boundaries. But if you're willing to keep trying, I'm willing to keep meeting you. She nodded, squeezing my hand. I'm willing. I'm so willing. We finished our lunch, talking about lighter things, her job, my work, the mundane details of lives that were slowly beginning to intersect. When she left that afternoon, we hugged at the door, and I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the possibility of both. It was enough. The months passed, and we continued to meet. Monthly at first, then more frequently as the awkwardness faded and genuine connection began to form. We discovered shared interests we had never explored, common ground we had never known existed. We talked about our childhoods, our parents, the dynamics that had shaped us in such different ways. We argued sometimes, and we made up, and we learned that conflict didn't have to mean destruction. Our parents were slower to change. My mother still called occasionally, leaving voicemails that I listened to but rarely returned. My father remained largely silent, his presence in my life reduced to birthday cards and the occasional forwarded article. They were who they were, and I had stopped expecting them to become something else. But Chloe was different. Chloe was trying. And that effort, however imperfect, however belated, was enough to keep the door open. 3 years after our first lunch, Chloe called me with news. I'm pregnant. Her voice was a mixture of joy and terror. Andrew and I are going to have a baby. I was in my office, reviewing investment proposals, and I set down my pen. Congratulations. How are you feeling? Terrified. Excited. Sick every morning. She laughed. Normal, I guess. We talked for an hour, about pregnancy and parenting and the future she was building. When we finally hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment, processing the news. My sister was going to have a baby. I was going to be an aunt. I thought about the distant table. I thought about the years of neglect, the decades of dismissal, the long and painful journey that had brought us here. I thought about the child who would grow up with 2 aunts, one of whom had been hidden away and one who was now a regular presence in her mother's life. I didn't know what kind of aunt I would be. I didn't know if I was capable of the unconditional love that children require, or if my own damaged history would prevent me from being fully present. But I knew that I wanted to try, and that, I had learned, was the most important thing. Chloe's daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. They named her Maya. I was in the delivery room when she arrived, holding my sister's hand, watching a new life enter the world. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I looked down at her tiny face, her clenched fists, her perfect, scrunched features, and I felt something I had never felt before. Not love. That would come later, growing with each visit and milestone. But possibility. The possibility of a different kind of family, a different kind of relationship, a different kind of future. The possibility that this child would grow up knowing that she had 2 aunts who loved her, who would always be there for her, who would never put her at a distant table. I looked at Chloe, exhausted and radiant in the hospital bed, and I smiled. She's perfect. She is. Chloe's eyes were wet. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking me. We sat in the quiet of the hospital room, the rain pattering against the windows, the new life sleeping in my arms. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the distant table, the canceled wedding, the years of silence and separation, the slow and painful work of building something new. It had not been easy. It had not been quick. It had required more patience and honesty and willingness to fail than I had ever imagined. But it had been worth it. Every awkward conversation, every painful acknowledgement, every tentative step toward connection had been worth it. Because now here, in this moment, I was holding my niece in my arms, and my sister was watching us with tears in her eyes, and we were family. Not the family we had been, damaged and dysfunctional and defined by neglect, but a new family, one we were building together, one choice at a time. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was simply the continuation of a journey, The next step on a path that had no clear destination. And it was enough. I am 40 years old now. My niece, Maya, is 5, and she is the light of my life. She calls me Annie Maya and draws me pictures and asks endless questions about everything. She has no idea about the distant table, the years of neglect, the complicated history that preceded her birth. To her, I am simply her aunt, the one who brings her presents and takes her to the park and tells her stories about dragons and princesses and brave girls who save themselves. I tell her those stories on purpose. I want her to know that she doesn't need to wait for anyone to save her. I want her to know that she is enough, exactly as she is, without condition or qualification. I want her to grow up with the certainty that took me 30 years to learn, that her worth is inherent, indivisible, absolute. Chloe and I are close now, in a way I never imagined possible. We talk weekly, see each other monthly, celebrate holidays and birthdays together. We still have our moments, old patterns that surface, old wounds that ache, but we've learned to navigate them with patience and honesty. We've learned that conflict doesn't have to mean destruction, that disagreement doesn't have to mean distance. Our parents are still a challenge. My mother calls regularly, and I answer sometimes. My father sends birthday cards and the occasional email. They are who they are, and I have stopped expecting them to become something else. But through Chloe and little Maya, we have found a way to coexist, to share space without reopening old wounds. It's not the relationship I dreamed of as a child, but it's real, and it's honest, and it's enough. I still think about the distant table sometimes. I think about sitting in that hallway, eating my dinner alone, listening to the laughter from the main room. I think about the pain I felt, the grief I swallowed, the decision I made to stop waiting for love that would never come. And I think about my sister standing in my doorway, listing venues and caterers and designer dresses, utterly convinced that I would write a check, because that's what family did. I think about the look on her face when I reminded her of the distant table, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that I was not the person she had always believed me to be. That moment changed everything. It changed me, certainly. I walked away from that conversation with a clarity I had never felt before. But it changed Chloe too. It forced her to see me, really see me, for the first time in her life. And from that seeing, everything else became possible. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Chloe and I will remain close, if little Maya will grow up to love us both, if our parents will ever fully understand what they lost and what they gained. But I know that I am no longer at the distant table. I am at the center of my own life, surrounded by people who love me, engaged in work that fulfills me, building a future that reflects my values and my choices. And that is enough. If you've ever been the one at the distant table, the one who's hidden away, dismissed, overlooked, know that your worth is not determined by those who fail to see you. Know that you can build a life on your own terms, without their permission or approval. Know that the people who matter will eventually find their way to you, and the ones who don't were never worth waiting for. The distant table is not your destination. It's just a moment in a much longer journey. Keep walking. Keep building. Keep believing that you are enough. Because you are. You always were. You just needed to see it for yourself. If you've ever been put at the distant table, remember, your worth is not determined by your seat. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, redemption, and reclaiming your place.